sat to my left, he's really a music biz polymath. He's a man of many hats. He's a songwriter, a producer, a creator. He's worked on TV. He runs, as we heard, a full-service management company, MER, and he's the MD of Liquid State, a joint venture between Sony Music and Tencent Music. He's helping to make the world a smaller place. And I actually get a buzz chatting to this guy. And I think you'll get a buzz hearing from him too. So please welcome Gunnar Grieve.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Gunnar, it makes sense for us to go way back to that point when you decided a career in law probably wasn't for you.
I'm a son of a law woman and a law man. My father is a lawyer and my mom was a judge. So they pretty much expected me to enter law school directly after college. But last year of college, I decided I actually got a record deal. So I had to go home pretty anxious and nervous to say and tell to my mom and dad, you know what, I don't think law school's it for me. I think I'd rather pursue a musical career as artist.
And what did Dad have to say about that?
Was not well received at all, I can tell you.
And he's okay with it now?
It's growing on him. It's growing on him. At least he can see I've made a living of it. But yeah, I've been living, breathing, thinking, acting, and working with artists and with music ever since. And that's, you know, soon 2 decades since.
You have a really interesting global view, and we'll explore this in a moment. Let's talk a little bit about what you worked in TV for about a decade, and there was a lot to learn from that, good and bad. And there's also elements of what TV could learn from our industry. Maybe you could walk us through what you learned from TV.
So I've been fortunate and privileged to be sitting on the jury, being a judge on the Norwegian Idols for 5 seasons now, and I've been also working as a TV host for a couple of shows, and I've been working in the production with several artists that I've either managed A&R'd or represented in some way or on some level, and I think that was an important part of understanding. You know, in the Nordics we became digital at a very early stage. Daniel Ek started Spotify in 2009, but we were dominated, like many others, by Pirate Bay and by Napster way before that. And the CDs were kind of obsolete long before we went into the 2010s and beyond. And when you come into the digital age, you also understand pretty quickly that you need to create attributes. You need to create co-creations around that holy grail, which is, you know, at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, and during the day, the song and the music. But the music needs content around it, and audio-visual products and content is, in my opinion, perhaps the most important part of what an artist needs to do today, besides making great music. So, working in television for a decade has been very educative in the sense that you learn how to format, how to tell a story. Because at the end of the day, you know, I think whether you're making a song, whether we're having a panel up here, whether you're creating a talent TV show, or putting up a concert, we're all working with creatives that are about telling a story. It's about creating you're a journalist. You know, the narrative is you know, it's crucial. It's imperative to everything you want to tell, the message that you want to put through. And I think in that sense, working with television for many years has been extremely valuable.
There's probably a similarity between the two industries in that long-form writing and journalism is a dying art. In the same way that everyone wants bite-sized pieces of information, and I struggle to get my kids to watch a Marvel film. It's ridiculous. They're at that age where they should love a Marvel film. I can't get them to sit still for 2 hours to watch Batman, a DC film, but they're quite happy to sit in front of an iPad and watch 2 hours of YouTube videos.
I think that, and that's a kind of a key right there, and I can understand. Do you get sad when your kids don't want to watch a Marvel movie?
Sad, somewhere between sad and angry, I think. There's a place in between.
And I think that's also a key, because it's always been like that. I remember reading something a conductor in Vienna, I believe, wrote back when the vinyl arrived in the late 1890s, I believe. He wrote an article in a newspaper about how he had experienced the death of music. He had seen how music was now turning into a dead object, which was the vinyl. And it's been the same, you know, every time when we moved from vinyl and over to cassette tapes and further on to compact discs and
I think radio is going to kill music.
Radio was going to kill music as well. It's always when you face a new disruptive change, it also comes with a challenge, because you've been used to telling that story and creating that narrative into a box or into a format or into a physical CD or whatever, that kind of gives you the framework of how you should tell that story. But the most important thing with change is to embrace what comes after, and not be, you know, locked in a box and think that whatever is coming after this change is going to be scary, it's going to be wrong, it's going to be, you know, think about the fact that the music industry spent billions on CD copy blocks. Think what we could spend that money on. They should have hired a guy from Napster. They should have sued him. You know what I mean? And I think the same goes for, you know, you shouldn't be sad or angry about your kids not wanting to watch Batman, because they're just consuming the entertainment and the visual, audio-visual or visual experience and entertainment in a different way. So they will be sitting, like you said, 2 hours in front of their iPads, but they want to jump in between. They probably want to have more adrenaline, more shorter intersections between every kick they get from what they watch, and the attention span is probably shorter for each piece of entertainment.
The flip side of all of that is they're really connected with music, and my daughter loves this artist called Alan Walker from Norway. She absolutely loves it. He must be her favorite recording artist right now, and she discovered his music through Musically, and then she discovered more of his music through NCS, the No Copyright Sounds platform within YouTube. And this tells me that music is very much part of my kids' DNA and others. So if the movie industry is going through some issues with format issues, and TV is also, I think there's some pretty optimistic lines on the horizon for music.
There definitely is, and I think that's important to know and to really, you know, make note of. I have kids myself, 2 daughters, and that's where they find their new music, and that's where they discover artists. It's not necessarily in the music industry and the labels especially. We're all raving about, did you get it on New Music Friday on Spotify? What kind of positioning did you get? Like, how big a banner did you get on QQ Music in China? Whereas actually, at the end of the day, that's not necessarily where the majority, especially of the young consumers, discover the music. They discover it on platforms, services, apps, and outlets that are, in many cases, disruptive, comparing them to the regular conventional industry outlets. And another very interesting thing, in my opinion, is that I've been hearing a lot of industry executives talking about, 10 years ago, an artist would go in a studio, record a record, give it to the label, put it out, do 2 weeks of promo, go 6 months on tour, and then maybe go 3 years back in the studio, and then do it again. That's definitely not the reality today. You have to be present. You have to release music at a higher frequency. Some labels would say that throwing 10 songs out in an album at once is throwing away 9 songs, because you only get attention for one at the time. So that has changed the entire way we release, how we package, promote, and present music to the audience. And they now talk about a constant cycle of artist to audience and back, and the importance of engagement. And we spoke a bit about this before our chat today. I think I want to rephrase that, and I want to say the key now is especially not necessarily for all artists and creators, but for many, especially the genres that are presenting or attracting the younger 15 to 25, or even maybe, you know, my oldest daughter is 7. She's definitely in the demographic, so maybe 5 to 25. It's important to think of it as creator to co-creator and back. Creator to co-creator and back. And the reason for that is that how many different ways, first of all, everybody probably here got a smartphone in their pocket or in their hand maybe right now, and you could easily obtain, or you might even have GarageBand or some sort of app or service that could enable you to make a piece of music in, you know, way before we're done with this session. And the fans are engaging and interacting on the level, whether it's fan art, covers on YouTube, gaming videos on various channels, whether it's dancing videos or miming videos on Musical.ly. I think all of these are co-creations to the original artist's original creation. And those artists who are able to and willing to embrace their audience as co-creators of their original creation, they find a very unique connection to the people that they present their music to.
Obviously, gaming is an important platform for breaking artists because so many kids are into gaming nowadays. Did you find that business was open to music and licensing, doing business with you?
Gaming?
Yep.
Definitely. I think gaming is one of those very Alan Walker, the one guy you mentioned, a 17-year-old guy I met 3 years ago. Now he's 21, 4 years ago actually. He taught me and he introduced me to the world of gaming and UGC content related to gaming. And I think gamers are in many ways, because they're so interested in tech, because music is so, you know, neatly tied in with what they do and how they, you know, I've seen and heard 24-hour versions of Faded, Alan's first single, on YouTube that gamers just sit and play because it goes in loop. So they consume music in different patterns and very alternative ways compared to what we're used to or were used to. So in that sense, they're an extremely early adapting audience. They're also mega consumers, I would say, in the sense that they consume a lot of music. But what I've come to experience and learn is also that they're extremely loyal. I would say one of the biggest challenges an artist have today, well, there's 25,000 plus songs being released every single day. You have like top 50 to 100 artist brands globally who have a free pass to everything. And then you have the next tier who's probably 300, 400, 500 artists who have at least access. And then there's millions of new artists that are putting out music every year. How do you get that attention? How do you get that? How can you break through the wall and through the sound barrier these days? And I think, you know, if you manage to get you have to convert that follower into a fan. And the conversion rate from followers to fans, because don't be mistaken, a follower is the most disloyal individual in the entire universe. He, she, or they will be 1 click, 1 second, 1 song, and 1 piece of content away from choosing the next. So converting that follower to a fan is extremely important if you're going to build a career of longevity, a brand as an artist. And in that sense, I do think that the gamers have shown me, at least, that they're very loyal. And they are, once you get them in the door, they'll stay, they'll stick around to hear and see and want to experience what you have next. So a long answer to a short question.
That's a good answer.
Game is important.
But so the release strategy is out the window from 10 years ago. It's on its head. But there is one element of building an artist which is traditional, and that is getting the artist in the market. And we'll go back to this chap, Alan Walker. He's booming in China, and he's been there how many times?
23?
23 times in how many years?
Less than 3.
Yeah, well, there you go. So that's obviously integral to building a profile, to bring someone into the market. He was also in Australia earlier this year for the Sony conference. I believe Dennis Handlin presented him with a plaque for 7 billion streams, was it, in Asia? I guess that number's risen.
We will probably surpassed 8 billion, but those numbers are like so astronomical. I can't manage to digest them. But what's the point of feet on the ground, time on the ground? Because it's a globalized world. It's a world where there are no borders. You can talk to a chap in Peru right here and right now. You can when I met Alan in his bedroom, he was communicating and collaborating with artists from all around the world in the same position as him, sitting in their bedroom producing music, in between gaming and such. But I do think that a very pivotal part of being able to build an artist and break an artist in various markets is understanding that regardless of the digitalization of the industry, regardless of the globalization and the WWW world, spending time on the ground, meeting people, talking to people, understanding the cultural differences from where you're coming from, where you've been and where you're going, and really utilize and educate yourself on how the various markets could. It's still very Norway and China, it's still pretty big differences on many levels, and that's why I believe it's so important that despite the continuous effort to strive a completely digitalized music industry, we should also never forget the importance and value of traveling, meeting people, and spending time on the ground in the various markets.
Are CDs dead? CDs. Are CDs dead?
CDs dead. Don't tell that to the Germans.
The classical industry still loves their CDs. I could spend the rest of this session talking about Alan, but Alan's coming for the next session, so we shouldn't do that. We can talk to Alan as well, but we ought to speak about the label, Liquid State, and how that came about. I believe Gavin Parry, who he's been part of Cornerstone to helping set this up. Maybe we can talk about the origins of the label.
So spending that much time with Alan in China, and on my own for that matter, we basically made a very conscious choice. Are we going to spend our time in North America and South America trying to break Alan properly over there, or are we going to go east? And we saw that Faded, Alan's debut single, was resonating extremely well throughout Asia, and especially in China. And we decided very early on that we wanted to travel east. I do believe it's a matter of when, not if, this becomes, and China becomes, the predominant region and market for music globally. We very early on decided and had the fortunate opportunity to go and visit Andy Young and the TENCENT music teams in Shenzhen, who are running what is by far the biggest system of music streaming services in the world. And through those meetings, through those very educative, and that was also being so embraceful and so open to us who came from Norway with little, next to no understanding and knowledge about how the market works, and helped us, guided us through the incredibly rich ecosystem that is Tencent Music Entertainment's various outlets, platforms, apps, and services that enabled us to use that initial resonance in the audience and build it into an actual career and a brand of longevity in China. So that's where it started at. And then Andy and Gavin Parry, Andy from Tencent and Gavin Parry from Sony and a couple of others, I believe, had already been working for a while with setting up this joint venture. And keep in mind, okay, we're in a time now where people are talking about in Europe, in the West, about direct licensing. Are Spotify going to do direct licensing with artists? TME has done that for a while, very successfully so. And I think some labels, especially in the US, are pretty scared about that thought. But I saw a model that really worked. I saw a TME that was servicing and working together with these individual big Chinese artists in a very successful way. So rather than looking at it, again, it's change. how do you meet change? Do you push it away? Do you show fear and try and, you know, obstruct the change, or do you embrace it? And I think what Andy and Gavin and the teams from TME and Sony Music APAC came up with, a joint venture, a label that is a joint venture between Sony Music and TME, is perhaps one of the keys to creating the labels of tomorrow. So when I got the opportunity, and I was privileged enough to get the offer of coming on board by Andy and Gavin to serve as managing director for Liquid State, I have to be honest, I live in Norway, I lived in Norway. I have a family, I have a business, I have a studio, I have a lot of things that keeps me there, but I didn't even think about it. I need to sort my family and how I can manage to get enough time with my daughters, and then I was yes, straight away. Because, yeah, this is working in the music market of tomorrow, the most exciting, the most vibrant and fastest growing market in the world, with the genre that is steadily growing across. You said this yesterday. Electronic music is one of those genres that has been able to translate and to work in a global scale, regardless of artist, origin, where they're from, age, etc., just because it's a universal language of music in many ways.
That's right. It's not bound to culture or lyrics, and typically electronic music fans are technically enabled, so it wins on both sides. With Liquid State, you've had a number of artists lined up, and also Alan plays a role as an ambassador and remixing and collaborating. Is that correct?
That's correct. So with Liquid State, there are many opportunities as there are ambitions. We have an extremely high level of ambitions, and our board of directors and shareholders in Sony and Tencent have the same. We want to build and create a label and a music company and eventually a lifestyle brand that can put electronic music from, in, and with the Chinese market in the forefront in a global perspective. So that is about bringing in international artists, doing collaboration with local artists. That is about bringing in international artists to do licensing and help them to, just in the same sense that TME and Andy and all of his teams helped us in understanding how the ARO, the Asian Regional Office from Sony, helped us understand how we could and should work the markets. But it's also extremely important for us to, and to me I feel it's a great honor to be in a country and be in a market where I have to say, I've never been seeing, hearing, and experiencing that much fresh, raw, and fantastic talent about to break and burst. So creating and developing Chinese DJs, producers, artists is also going to be a huge part, and hopefully eventually we get the chance to be a part of breaking the first or biggest global superstar from China.
It's hearing all of this is such a world away from watching panels at Medium in 2005 with executives pondering how they could sell more CDs. The world's changed. It's great. There's something obvious which is often overlooked in that streaming also helps build touring. That's got to be a big part of this picture. You can analyze the data where the music is being played, and you can go to those markets. It helps build the live act on the ground.
The touring is obviously and naturally it's going to be forever, you know, like that conductor in Vienna about a couple of 100 years ago. Music didn't die by going into a physical format and now into a digital format. You know, presenting and communicating with music live to an audience is forever going to be a very, very important part of music and music industry. But I do think it's important that you have to understand a lot of agencies, a lot of artists, a lot of managers come into Asia from Europe and the US and think, you know, that's fast money and that's big money and that's easy money in many ways. But they don't necessarily leave a footprint behind. Because if you're going to build something, for example, in China, that lasts over a year, 2, 3, 5, 10, you have to do more than to go in and just do the gigs. So yeah, the concerts and the touring is an important and imperative part of everything an artist should do and does in 2018 and beyond. But I do believe that it's important to not be blinded by the opportunity to make quick money by doing gigs and festivals, because after all, you know, converting those followers into fans is the most most difficult part and biggest challenge of them all. And I don't think that's necessarily done just through one concert.
We only have 4 minutes plus until we have to wrap this session up. So if there is a question, I can see an arm's gone straight up here. You were waiting for that, weren't you? We have a question. Can we please get a mic to this table?
You want to speak loud, or do you want... I'm kidding.
You can have my mic.
Hello.
Hi.
There we go. My name is Sarah Jane. I'm from South Africa. I run an artist management business over there. Thank you so much. It's really, really interesting and exciting for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
From an executive perspective, working in a developing market, I want to know, are there opportunities within China for us, not having an understanding of the market whatsoever? What would your take be on that?
There's definitely, there are only opportunities, I would say, and they're almost countless. I would say if I were to give you any advice, the first is to spend time on the ground. The first is to come into China and spend actual time on the ground. And again, going back to Lars's previous question, not necessarily by doing a gig or setting up a tour. It's like if a South African artist, you wouldn't, you know, aim, or management, you wouldn't aim to set up a North American tour for your artist before you've spent time on the ground, before you've seen that the music resonates with the audience in the market, and that you have a solidified arm or some sort of platform. So I think that is very important, and you have to keep in mind that the Chinese social networking system, the social media, are completely different from in the West. So getting a setup and getting a team operating on the ground to help you create content customized for the Chinese market is also a very crucial part in getting into that market. It's not about just mirroring what you're doing on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. It's about understanding and with you know a curiosity come into the market and really understand what kind of messaging, what kind of content can me and my artists provide this market with to gain and attract the attention from the audience, and then eventually also, you know, try to connect the dots, because the turnover in content and music in China, in my experience, and there's people in the room that know that much better than I do, I believe, and I've experienced it to be even faster than in the West. So being present and on the ground is probably the most important advice.
Thank you.
Great question and a great response. Thanks for that. This is a forum for sharing ideas after all. Is there one more question perhaps from the audience? We do have, there's one here.
Hi there. I wanted to ask you about your take on the underground scene. I've just recently graduated studying Chinese music in the UK and wrote my thesis on the underground electronic music scene specifically. I spent a lot of time in China kind of researching it, and the main problem, especially underground, is censorship and government issues and the taboo that kind of lingers over not just electronic underground music but also kind of punk and all those sorts of things. So kind of more mainstream where you're coming from, do you ever have to deal with government issues or censorship or anything like that?
I think anybody and everybody operating in China has to deal with and has to you know, work with and around the censorship and the regulations. But I believe it to be slightly exaggerated, especially for electronic music. There's been some strike downs on rap and hip hop and urban music in the recent times, and And honestly, I have to say that to a certain degree, I actually concur. I'm 100% for the freedom of speech, so don't get me wrong, and freedom to create whatever you want. But I do feel that sometimes people outside of China are exaggerating, or again, you know, what's different and what's changed or is working in a different way than what it does in your own country and your whole market makes you kind of like distance yourself from it. So my experience on the ground, and you've probably seen and heard this, because when you get into the underground scene of the electronic music in China, that's an incredible experience. You know, when I came in the job, there were 400 demos waiting for me on my desk. I think that's the best week. It's the longest week, but it's the best creative week I've had in my life, because there are so much good music. There are so many brilliant creators coming from the underground movements and underground scene of China right now that, again, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we have that next and probably first global superstar Chinese DJ and producer.